So, have you seen The Great Debaters? I made a video about this being the gift of black folk in the age of terrorism after Cornel West's speech inaugurating the Toni Morrison Center at Princeton. And what I wanted to say with this is that see the film. And I'll make two quotes from the film. One of them is "The time for equality is now," and she's talking about in the first sort of interracial or cross-racial debate that the school had, Wiley College had. The lead female character says the time for equality is now because people keep saying go slow. They keep on saying go slow. You know, after Nina Simone's song Mississippi Goddamn. And at a certain point in the movie, the main characters experience terror. That terror is lynching. It was the most common form of terrorism used to let black people know their place in racist white America, and done so with violence. And of course now we know that that's just done through policy. But one of the male lead characters responded to that terrorism with addiction to sex and alcohol. A very common response that we see is very pervasive in today's world, that people respond to any sort of stress with addiction, be it addiction to shopping, addiction to credit, so much so that it endangers their own lives, you know. But at the end of the movie, it's the young character that reminds us in a very eerie way, because of course we know the outcome of the story. But he says, look, when they debated Harvard, civil disobedience was the topic. And so one side debated the affirmative and the other side debated against it. And of course, they talked about Gandhi, and of course, they talked about, the success of Gandhi, and they talked about Amritsar, and of course, this is pre-civil rights. So this is before Martin Luther King. And so we know the outcome of whatever the movie says or whatever happened at Wiley College. Actually, we know that civil disobedience was the methodology chosen that would revolutionize the United States. And so that's how he closed it. He said, you know, do you meet violence with violence? Or do you start peace with peace? Do you start reconciliation with reconciling one's self and one's own moral convictions with the pervading and dominant ideology? Now, by invading Iraq, you know, by responding in invading Afghanistan and sort of demanding that the world line up along one of, these lines, in the Cold War it was communist and democratic, but actually it was more about socialism and capitalism. Well, yeah, capitalism is winning, and people think that capitalism is the word of the day, but the consumerist lifestyle that just leads us to consume culture, to consume anything, to consume energy, consumption as a way of life is where we stand. And these are important messages because they feed us. They feed our addiction. And the fact that consumerism has gone so far, so much so that we are killing ourselves, and not just because there are people who are going bankrupt as individuals, and not just because income disparities around the world are increasing. The gap between the poor and the wealthy is just increasing as a result of growing capitalism. Not just because Africa has become poor, is the only continent to become poor over the past 20 years. And I sit here and I look at you as a person of African descent, and I tell you there is not a day that I walk on this earth that I cannot accept that as a reality of my life. It is not a reality of my heritage. It is not a reality of a legacy of slave trade, of the transatlantic commerce. It is an everyday reality that as a black person walking on this planet, there are forces that are so great, so dominant, and so pervasive that our people are just poor everywhere we are on this planet. That's some strange fruit to devour. And so when you look at the great debaters, and these guys are talking about, in your times of despair, even in your times of despair, but certainly in your times of happiness and great tranquility, how do you meet challenge? How do you reconcile yourself, your consciousness, with the world around you? Having met a great deal of adversity to just exist on this planet, Black Americans, as a new ethnic group, is one of the newest ethnic groups on this planet. Black Americans, I think, are pretty uniquely placed to offer some very important lessons to the globe about spirituality, about how to approach modernity, about how to continue to grow and yet not forget, right? Because this is the difference between forgiving and forgetting. We can always forgive. We must always forgive. And there's no mystery why forgiveness is a dominant theme in the way that Black people interpret Christianity, in the way that Black people interpret Islam, in the way that Black people interpret Buddhism, Baha'ism, and religion after religion. It is by no mistake that forgiveness and not forgetting is a dominant theme in how we approach spirituality. And so when that young man says at the end of the Great Debaters, you should pray that I choose, nonviolence, civil disobedience as a means to transform this world, he's saying something very specific. There is no threat. It is saying we are still here. We, the collective we, this globe. And as much as we try to polarize ourselves, as convenient as it may seem to polarize wealth and poverty, developed and developing, white and black, male and female, et cetera, we have to remember that at the end of the day, we have a moral obligation, a moral responsibility to listen to ourselves. We have a moral obligation to listen to ourselves. And that simply cannot be achieved through consumerism. That simply cannot be achieved through eating and chomping and devouring the world around us and looking for happiness in what's external. If there's one thing that we have learned as Black people in this world, being so low as to at one point not even own our own bodies, and not through addiction, but not even own our own bodies, to becoming 3/5, to becoming, second-class citizens, to becoming just the shit of the planet. If there's one thing that we do know, is that despite what the world shows you about all of the trinkets and happiness that you can have, happiness has to come when you look at yourself, look in the mirror, and you can reconcile yourself with your activities. Do these things, are they balanced? Do they meet? You better pray that they do.